She hadn't flown in 22 years, an eternity that had coated her wings with a thick layer of dust and silenced memories. But on that day, time seemed to bend upon itself, a macabre gift from destiny that demanded the woman she once was. The life of a child, barely 9 years old, hung by an invisible thread, as fragile as a spider's web in the midst of a whirlwind. The snow fell mercilessly, a white, deadly veil that swallowed the horizon, transforming the world into a desolate void. None of the young, intrepid pilots, brimming with diplomas and recent flight hours, dared to lift their eyes to the fury unfolding outside, much less to the storm brewing in their own hearts. Fear, a silent and relentless enemy, had settled in the eyes of each of them, paralyzing the courage that in normal times propelled them skyward. Claire Dawson, the mechanic with calloused hands and oil-stained overalls, observed everything with a disturbing calm, her deep blue eyes, clouded by the passage of time and secret battles, fixed on a distant point. The sound of the radio, which once seemed a chorus of confident voices, now dwindled to an oppressive silence, heavy as molten lead, while the urgency of a life at risk echoed in every beat of her own heart, a long-forgotten war drum. In her mind, a single image flickered, that of a dusty helmet, an old companion from countless battles patiently waiting in a dark locker, the silent promise of a past that refused to be buried. It was a call, a persistent whisper that transcended years of abandonment, a summons that could not be ignored. She knew, with the cold, cutting certainty of experience, that it was time to answer. There was no more time for hesitation or for the comfort of invisibility. This was the moment. This was her moment. And history, without anyone realizing it, leaned upon itself, ready for an unexpected and dramatic turn. At 64, Claire was just the mechanic, the wrench lady, an almost anonymous figure who spent her days tightening bolts and patching rotor blades at Mountain Crest Emergency Base. Most barely noticed her. Some of the younger pilots didn't even know her name. To them, she was a shadow, a discreet presence that blended with the smell of oil and metal. But that fateful morning, with a whiteout blizzard raging, the power grid failing, and a 9-year-old boy clinging to life 100 miles away, something shifted in the stagnant air of the base, a thin line separating routine from imminent tragedy. Every trained pilot, each with years of experience and documented flight hours, stood down. It was too risky, too blind, too cold. They mumbled excuses, their voices choked with dread, as the boy's face, transmitted over the radio, seemed to freeze in their minds. Claire, indifferent to the wave of despair sweeping through the hangar, walked past them in silence. Her steps were firm, determined, burdened with the weight of a past they couldn't even conceive. She walked past the control room, past the doubters, past those who underestimated her. Her gaze, which had seemed lost in the void, now held a steel glint, a focus that could not be diverted. Each step brought her closer to the hangar, closer to her destiny, closer to the machine that would reconnect her to her true self. The air around her seemed to vibrate with contained energy, the anticipation of something monumental about to happen. She walked straight to her locker, a relic of a time long past, tucked away. In a dimly lit corner of the hangar bay, the metal door, scarred and faded, seemed to guard secrets known only to her. With a deliberate, almost reverent motion, Claire reached inside, her fingers brushing against forgotten tools and faded uniforms. From the cool, dark interior, she pulled out a flight helmet that hadn't seen the light of day in over 2 decades. Its visor was scratched, a web of fine lines etched by countless encounters with wind and debris, a map of battles fought and won. The paint was chipped in places, revealing glimpses of the composite material beneath, silent testament to its endured hardships. But the pilot inside, she knew, had never truly left. Her essence, her instinct, her unparalleled skill, all remained intact, merely dormant, waiting for the right moment to reawaken. A whisper snaked through the hushed hangar, a voice barely audible above the distant howl of the blizzard. "Who even is she?" someone asked, their tone laced with a mix of curiosity and a disbelief. Another shrugged, a gesture of dismissal, their ignorance a shield against the unsettling truth. "She's just the mechanic," came the indifferent reply. They didn't know. They couldn't fathom the depths of her past, the battles she had faced, the lives she had saved. They didn't know that Claire had once flown medevac missions through enemy fire, her hands steadying more lives than they could count. Her name, once whispered in war zones as the pilot you prayed would come, was now about to echo again, not because anyone asked her to, but because someone had to. This wasn't a choice. It was a calling, a destiny unfolding before their bewildered eyes. Claire Dawson had established a ritual, a silent pact with the dawn, arriving at Mountain Crest Emergency Base every morning at 5:15 a.m. sharp. She never needed an alarm. An internal clock, tuned to the rhythm of responsibility, roused her with unwavering precision. Her hands, scarred and calloused from decades of dedicated service, moved with a practiced rhythm. Talk, inspect, adjust, repeat. This was her mantra, the quiet symphony of her daily routine, a methodical approach to maintaining the delicate balance between machine and mission. She didn't wear a headset or bark orders into a radio. Instead, Claire wore grease-stained overalls, a uniform of quiet competence, and carried a clipboard faded from sun and time, a testament to countless hours spent in the open air. To the younger crew members, she was just the mechanic, the unassuming woman who tirelessly tightened bolts on the medevac choppers, changed fuel filters with meticulous care, and wiped down rotor blades with quiet, precise movements. She rarely spoke unless directly addressed, never interrupted briefings, and even eschewed the break room coffee, preferring her own thermos, black, steel, and old, a silent symbol of her self-sufficiency and detachment. Some pilots, thinking she couldn't hear, derisively called her Wrench Lady. Others merely smirked as they walked past, their fleeting glances filled with a mixture of disdain and ignorance. They saw only the surface, a woman defined by her tools and her quiet demeanor, completely oblivious to the extraordinary past that shaped her, the wisdom that resided within her, and the dormant capabilities that were about to ignite like a forgotten ember in the gathering storm. "Morning, Claire," Josh called out one brisk morning, his voice a casual dismissal as he barely glanced up from his phone, engrossed in the digital world. He was one of the newer pilots, fresh-faced and brimming with an unearned confidence, his youth often mistaking itself for wisdom. "Morning," she replied, her voice a low, calm murmur, almost lost in the cavernous expanse of the hangar. Her eyes, however, were already scanning the skids of Helicopter 3, her gaze sharp and precise, taking in every minute detail with an almost surgical intensity. Claire had been a fixture at Mountain Crest for 14 unwavering years. In all that time, she had never once called in sick, never once left before the last chopper returned safely to its bay. She was a silent guardian, a steadfast presence, yet no one truly knew her. They didn't know where she came from, what battles she had fought, or the incredible woman she used to be. And most crucially, they had absolutely no idea of the extraordinary capabilities she still possessed, dormant but ever present, waiting for the right catalyst to ignite. Younger flight techs, full of a bravado born of inexperience, often joked around in the hangar bay, their laughter echoing through the vast space. On one particular morning, as a formidable snowfront began to roll in, they were openly mocking the creaks in Rotor 2, spinning it by hand like a toy, their boisterous mirth filling the air. "Better tell Grandma to bring her magic wrench," one snickered, his voice dripping with condescension, completely unaware of the profound disrespect he was showing to a living legend. Claire, with a quiet dignity that bordered on invisible, walked right past them, her steps steady and unwavering. She laid a hand on the blade, her fingers tracing its smooth surface, a silent communion with the machine. "It's not the blade," she stated quietly, her voice barely above a whisper, yet it cut through their crude laughter with an unexpected authority. "It's the coupling behind the gearbox. You'll feel it if you listen, not just look." The two young men blinked, their smiles faltering, their playful mockery dissolving into a stunned silence. They watched, mesmerized, as she tightened a single bolt with a precision that defied their understanding, adjusted the mount with an almost imperceptible movement, and spun the rotor again. This time it turned smooth, silent, without a single sound of protest. The laughter died, stifled by a sudden, profound realization. They didn't ask how she knew, didn't question how someone could diagnose a problem. From a single vibration, a faint tremor that was invisible to their less experienced senses, they simply watched, a dawning respect flickering in their eyes as she packed up her tools with the same quiet efficiency and moved on to her next task. Later that week, Josh found her sitting near the landing pad, her eyes closed, face tilted to the wind. "What are you doing?" he chuckled, his voice still tinged with his usual dismissiveness. Claire opened one eye, her gaze unfocused as if listening to something beyond human hearing. "The wind," she said simply, her voice carrying an ancient wisdom. "The air tells you things if you know how to hear it." Josh laughed, a sound of disbelief, and walked away, muttering something about old-timers and ghost stories, completely unaware of the profound truth in her words. But Claire stayed still, her senses attuned not to weather patterns, but to memories of a past where the wind truly dictated life or death. She wasn't listening for weather. She was, remembering. Remembering nights when the whispers of the wind meant the stark difference between life and agonizing death. Remembering precisely how the intricate sound of the air, a language only she seemed to comprehend, told her when to bravely lift off into the unknown, and when to urgently run for cover, when to advance, and when to retreat. Back in the hangar, a crude yet undeniably humorous cartoon had been drawn on the whiteboard, a stark white canvas in the middle of the bustling workspace. It depicted a stick figure, instantly recognizable by its wispy gray hair and the ubiquitous wrench clutched in its hand, riding a helicopter as if it were a bucking bronco, a cowboy astride his trusty steed. Below the caricature, scrawled in bold, playful letters, was the label, "The Rotor Wrangler." Claire saw it, her gaze lingering for a moment, a faint, almost imperceptible smile playing on her lips. She didn't erase it, didn't show an ounce of offense. She simply smiled, a private, knowing amusement dancing in her eyes because they didn't know. They had no idea of the extraordinary truth behind the whimsical drawing. They didn't know that she had flown into blistering fire zones with only minutes of fuel clinging desperately to her tanks, daring fate with every turn of the rotor. They didn't know that she had once held the coveted record for the fastest extraction under combat in her unit, a feat of daring and skill that few could ever hope to replicate. They didn't know the name Commander Claire Dawson, a name that was still indelibly etched in a wall of honor somewhere overseas, a testament to her profound bravery and countless selfless acts. All they knew, all they recognized, was the wrench, the simple tool that symbolized her current, seemingly mundane role. But soon, that narrow perception, that profound ignorance of her true identity, would irrevocably change. Not because Claire yearned for glory, not because she craved revenge for years of being overlooked, but because one day soon the skies would turn truly malevolent, becoming a formidable, life-threatening adversary. And when they did, when the world cried out for a hero, the wrench lady would fly again. The slow, quiet unraveling of Claire's hidden past began in a dusty, forgotten storage room, a place rarely disturbed and filled with the scent of aged paper and stale air. Eloise, a new trainee barely 22 years old, fresh out of technical school and brimming with an eager desire to impress, had been assigned the thankless task of inventorying the old maintenance archives. Most people despised this particular assignment, seeing it as a monotonous chore of sifting through old papers in a stuffy, unpraised environment. But Eloise didn't mind. She possessed a natural curiosity, a genuine fondness for digging through forgotten remnants of the past. 3 hours into her meticulous search, her fingers brushed against a battered file folder, its label barely legible, almost faded into oblivion by the passage of time. Inside, she found a treasure trove, yellowed flight records, meticulously handwritten logs detailing countless missions, faded diagrams illustrating complex aerial maneuvers, and, crucially, one small laminated ID badge. The name emblazoned upon it stopped her cold. Claire Dawson, Medevac Commander. The words leaped out at Eloise, stark against the faded background of the laminate. Commander. She blinked, the title a jarring contrast to the unassuming mechanic she knew. Eloise glanced at the photo on the badge, then back at the image of the woman kneeling by helicopter 1, adjusting a pressure gauge with methodical precision. It was the same face, just younger. The lines around the eyes softer, but the quiet strength in them was unmistakably identical, a timeless quality that defied the passage of years. A sudden, almost uncontrollable urge to share her discovery surged through her. Clutching the badge as if it were a fragile piece of ancient history, Eloise walked back to the hangar. She found Claire absorbed in her work, her concentration absolute, a quiet hum emanating from the machine under her skilled touch. "Hey, Claire," Eloise asked gently, her voice barely above a whisper, hesitant to break the older woman's focus. Claire didn't look up, her hands still moving with fluid, practiced ease, her mind deeply immersed in the intricacies of the helicopter's mechanics. "I found something from the archives," Eloise continued, her excitement bubbling over. She held out the badge, the small laminated rectangle now seeming to glow with a hidden significance. Claire paused, her hand freezing on the wrench, a silent testament to the impact of the unexpected revelation. The air in the hangar seemed to thicken, charged with an unspoken tension, as if the very past itself had suddenly materialized between them, challenging the present reality. Slowly, deliberately, Claire took the badge, her fingers brushing against Eloise's with a faint tremble that Eloise barely perceived. She stared at it for a long, quiet second, her eyes, usually so impassive, now clouded with a fleeting mixture of distant memory and profound reflection. A lifetime seemed to pass in that moment, a silent film of untold stories flickering behind her gaze. Then, with a sigh that carried the weight of years, she handed it back. "Keep it," she said, her voice a low murmur, tinged with a weariness that Eloise hadn't heard before. "It probably means more to you now than it does to me." Eloise hesitated, a knot of confusion tightening in her stomach. "But this says you were a flight commander," she pressed, unable to reconcile the title with the humble mechanic before her. Claire wiped her hands on a rag, a simple habitual gesture that seemed to punctuate the end of an era. "I was," she replied, her voice devoid of bitterness or pride, a mere statement of fact. "What happened?" Eloise persisted, driven by an insatiable curiosity, a sense that there was a much larger, more compelling story beneath the surface. Claire stood, meeting her eyes, a silent challenge in her gaze. "I stopped flying," she stated, and that was all she said. No elaborate explanation, no dramatic recounting of events, just the blunt, unvarnished truth. Later that day, Eloise couldn't keep the discovery to herself. The weight of the secret, the sheer magnitude of Claire's hidden past, was too immense to bear alone. She told Josh, who in turn told the other techs. By the next morning, half the team had heard whispers of the ghost pilot in their midst. Claire Dawson used to fly, used to lead, they whispered, their voices a mixture of awe and bewilderment. But the intricate details, the harrowing tales of her past, those remained shrouded in mystery, lost to the annals of forgotten military records and the silence of a woman who chose not to speak of her glories. So, in the absence of concrete facts, they filled in the blanks with their own wild imaginings, weaving narratives born of speculation and conjecture. Some claimed she quit because of a catastrophic crash, a fiery descent from the sky that left her scarred and unwilling to return to the cockpit. Others theorized she froze under the intense pressure of combat, her courage faltering, leading to her being grounded indefinitely. A few, in a misguided attempt at humor, even joked that she probably just liked fixing things more than she enjoyed flying them, a dismissive quip that completely missed the profound irony of her situation. None of them, not a single one, got it right. They didn't know the chilling truth, that Claire had once flown 37 consecutive medevac missions during the brutal siege of Sangar Valley, a relentless series of life-or-death flights that tested the limits of human endurance and skill. They didn't know that her final, most perilous flight involved extracting 6 wounded soldiers from behind enemy lines, a death-defying maneuver executed with 1 rotor half-shot and no radio communication, a testament to her unparalleled heroism. They didn't know that when she returned from that impossible mission, the military brass, in a rare moment of recognition, offered her both a medal and a desk job. symbols of honor and a comfortable retirement. And Claire, with a quiet defiance that shocked them, said no to both. Because, as she knew with a painful certainty, medals don't bring back the ones you couldn't. Save the faces that haunt your dreams, the sacrifices made in vain, and desks. They were too far from the sky, too far from the vast open expanse where she truly belonged. So, with the same quiet determination that defined her, she simply walked away. No grand farewell, no elaborate ceremony, just a silent, unassuming exit, a wrench still clutched firmly in her hand, a symbol of her chosen path. In the break room that week, someone, perhaps touched by the whispers of her past, had drawn a gold star next to her name on the schedule board, a small yet significant act of homage. Beneath it, scrawled in Sharpie, were the words, "The Ghost Pilot." Claire saw it, sipped her coffee from her old familiar thermos, and showed no outward reaction. But Eloise, ever observant, noticed something subtle, a flicker of something long dormant. Claire started humming again, soft, barely audible melodies, old songs from the radio back then, tunes that resonated with forgotten memories. And once, just once, Eloise caught Claire staring at the sky, her eyes wet with unshed tears, her lips silently mouthing words no one else could hear, a private conversation with the vast, indifferent expanse above. That same night, the ominous silence of the base was shattered by a piercing weather alert. A massive storm front was rapidly building, threatening to unleash its fury with icy conditions and zero visibility. Eloise, still processing the fragmented revelations about Claire's past, looked at the schedule board, her gaze instinctively drawn to the flight roster. Claire's name wasn't on it. It hadn't been for decades. Her role was now confined to the mechanical bay, a world away from the dangerous, unpredictable skies. Yet, driven by an inexplicable intuition, a gut feeling that resonated deep within her, Eloise circled Claire's name anyway, not because she genuinely believed Claire would fly, but because a deeper, more primal instinct told her that she might have to. The storm, a monstrous entity of swirling snow and biting winds, arrived 2 days earlier than predicted. It descended from the ridgelines with a terrifying howl, as if it had a score to settle with the land below. Icy fog, thick and impenetrable, blanketed the entire base, reducing visibility to near zero, transforming the familiar landscape into a ghostly, indistinct blur. But the calls for help, desperate pleas echoing through the crackling radio, didn't stop coming. Accidents, hypothermia cases, a logging crew, stranded in a remote canyon. The emergencies piled up, each one a life hanging precariously in the balance. The base was under siege, not by an enemy army, but by the relentless, unforgiving power of nature, and every minute counted. Josh, with his characteristic blend of youthful confidence and undeniable cockiness, immediately volunteered. "I've flown worse," he declared, adjusting his flight gloves with a flourish that suggested they were medals of honor rather than mere protective gear. His voice, usually brimming with self-assurance, now carried a subtle tremor, betraying a hint of the underlying fear. Claire, ever the silent observer, didn't utter a single word. Her focus remained sharp, her eyes meticulously checking the skids of Helicopter 3 as he confidently climbed aboard, his bravado a stark contrast to her quiet intensity. Eloise stood nearby, a silent spectator, her worry etched on her face. "Should we be flying in this?" she whispered, the question barely audible above the rising howl of the wind. Josh, with a dismissive laugh, simply shrugged off her concern. "Storms are only scary if you let them be," he retorted, his words attempting to project an invincibility he didn't quite feel. He lifted off, the powerful blades cutting through the dense gray air, and vanished into the swirling whiteout. 10 agonizing minutes later, the radio crackled ominously, a sound of static and impending doom, then abruptly cut out. A chilling silence descended, thick with dread, before the piercing wail of a siren rent the air. An emergency signal. Low rotor failure. The crew scrambled, their movements a frantic blur of urgency and panic. Claire, however, did not run. She walked, steady and focused, towards the landing pad where a team was frantically prepping the backup chopper. Her composure, in the face of widespread chaos, was unnerving, a beacon of calm amidst the storm. Josh's bird, once a symbol of his youthful confidence, now limped back into view, pitching, awkwardly to the left, a wounded giant fighting against the furious gale. Its descent was erratic, uncontrolled, a chilling testament to the blizzard's brutal power. Claire's eyes narrowed, instantly assessing the damage, her gaze sharper than any instrument on the control panel. "That's not the wind," she stated, her voice calm, yet resonating with an undeniable authority that cut through the rising panic in the hangar. She recognized the specific, unnatural vibration, a silent language of distress that only years of intimate knowledge with these machines could decipher. Rotor 3 was vibrating off-axis badly, a critical failure that threatened to tear the aircraft apart mid-air. Before anyone else could fully react, before the senior mechanics could even formulate a plan, Claire sprang into action. She didn't run with frantic haste. Her movements were fluid, precise, honed by decades of emergency response. She ran to the toolbox, a familiar sanctuary of her craft, and with a swift, decisive motion, grabbed a length of insulated line and a torque rod from her own personal, meticulously maintained set of tools. Whispers erupted among the stunned crew. "Where's she going?" someone asked, their voice laced with disbelief. "Is she trying to fly that thing?" Another questioned, their tone bordering on incredulity, completely missing the profound depth of her intentions. She wasn't trying to fly it. She was trying to keep it from disintegrating before it even touched the ground. A desperate, high-stakes ballet against the forces of physics and the brutal elements. Claire waited, her body tensed, her eyes locked on the crippled chopper as Josh hovered shakily above the pad, the aircraft screeching in metallic protest, every bolt and rivet groaning under the immense strain. The sound was agonizing, a symphony of imminent destruction. The moment the skids touched down, even before the machine fully settled, she was underneath it. There was no hesitation, no safety net, just pure primal instinct guiding her every move. One hand, strong and steady, expertly wrapped the insulated line around the damaged mount, securing it with practiced efficiency. The other tightened the torque rod, half by brute muscle, half by an almost supernatural feel for the machine's anatomy. She adjusted the angle, added a compensator wedge, a small but crucial piece of her personal kit, and braced the tail with a calculated, almost imperceptible shift of her weight. The deafening noise abruptly ceased. The rotor miraculously balanced. The chopper settled with a sudden, profound sigh of relief, its protest silenced. Josh stepped out, shaken, his face as white as the swirling snow, the bravado completely drained from him. Claire met his eyes, her gaze soft but unwavering. "You okay?" she asked, her voice calm amidst the lingering chaos. He nodded slowly, still visibly trembling, then looked at the miraculously stable chopper, his eyes wide with a mixture of awe and bewilderment. What did you do?" he stammered, the words barely forming. She didn't answer, just wiped her hands on her overalls, a familiar, unassuming gesture, and walked away, leaving him to grapple with the profound implications of what he had just witnessed. Later, in the quiet hum of the hangar, the senior mechanic reviewed the black box data, his brow furrowed in concentration. The raw numbers, the cold, hard facts of the near catastrophe, slowly unveiled the chilling truth. "Rotor, coupling nearly sheared mid-air," he muttered, his voice a low, incredulous whisper, a testament to the severity of the malfunction. The implications were terrifying. Total structural failure, a plummeting, fiery crash, an outcome that would have been undoubtedly fatal for all aboard. Eloise, who had watched Claire's impossible repair with her own eyes, offered a small, knowing smile, a flicker of triumph in her gaze. "She saved it with rope," she stated, her voice imbued with a quiet pride, a challenge to the mechanic's professional skepticism. The senior mechanic scoffed, a dismissive sound, unable to comprehend the sheer ingenuity and audacity of such a claim. "It's not just rope," Eloise corrected, her voice gaining strength, brimming with newly acquired knowledge. "It's field-grade tension cord. Military issue." The mechanic blinked, surprised by her sudden expertise. "How do you know?" he asked, his skepticism giving way to a dawning curiosity. "Because I looked it up," Eloise replied, her eyes bright with the thrill of discovery. "Only medevac commanders used it during rapid response patches in live zones." The man blinked again, a profound realization slowly spreading across his face. "Who even teaches that anymore?" he murmured, a question hanging in the air, a silent acknowledgement of a lost art. Eloise didn't answer. She didn't have to. The truth, now partially revealed, spoke volumes. That night someone, perhaps inspired by the day's astonishing events and Eloise's revelation, rewrote the cartoon on the whiteboard. The old, dismissive stick figure with a wrench was gone, wiped clean from the slate of ignorance. In its place, a sleek black helicopter soared gracefully, a symbol of power and precision, and beneath it, a single, poignant line written with reverence and newfound respect. Commander Claire, still holding the line. The next morning, a subtle yet significant shift permeated the atmosphere of the base. Josh, the cocky young pilot, approached Claire with a steaming cup of coffee in his hand. He didn't offer a speech, didn't stammer out apologies or effusive praise. He simply nodded, a silent gesture of profound respect, an acknowledgement of her unmatched skill and courage. Claire nodded back, a flicker of understanding passing between them. That was enough. Respect, she knew, didn't require grand words or elaborate ceremonies. It needed only a moment, a shared understanding forged in the crucible of near disaster and, sometimes, the stark reality of a near crash to shatter preconceived notions. The snow didn't stop. By the third relentless day, the mountain was sealed in an impenetrable white silence, isolated from the world. Roads were closed, power lines were down, severing all connections. There was no way in, no way out, trapping the base in a frozen, silent vigil. Inside the dispatch center, the team huddled around the emergency scanner, the crackle of static a constant, unnerving companion. Then, cutting through the chilling silence, came the call that would forever alter the course of that bleak day. A boy, just 9 years old, lay critically injured from a sledding accident, his small body gripped by severe head trauma. He had lost consciousness an hour ago, his vital signs fading rapidly, slipping away like sand through an hourglass. He was trapped in Larkage, a remote town nestled 97 miles northwest of the base, a place utterly cut off by the relentless blizzard. There was no road access. No ambulance could possibly navigate the impassable drifts and treacherous ice, rendering conventional rescue impossible. The only hope, a desperate flickering beacon in the overwhelming darkness, was an airlift. A collective gasp went through the dispatch center, followed by a tense, agonizing silence. "Which chopper's ready?" the supervisor demanded, his voice strained with urgency, the weight of a dying child's fate heavy on his shoulders. "Only Hilo 2, someone replied, their voice barely a whisper, laden with the grim reality of their limited options. "But it's half-fueled and visibility is 40%, dropping fast." A beat of unbearable silence stretched, thick and suffocating, as the gravity of the situation settled upon them. Josh, usually quick with a confident retort, looked at the map, his face pale and grim, the earlier bravado replaced by a stark understanding of the impossible task. "No way we make it in and out blind, even with GPS," he muttered, his voice laced with resignation, acknowledging the insurmountable odds. Pilot Ramirez, his face etched with grim determination, stepped forward, a flicker of desperate hope in his eyes. "I'll go," he declared, his voice resolute despite the overwhelming conditions. "I've done worse." Just as he uttered those words, a figure emerged from the shadows at the back of the room, her presence quiet yet commanding. Claire stepped into the dispatch center, her gaze sweeping over the screen displaying the boy's fading vitals. Her eyes, usually so focused on the mechanics of flight, now seemed to pierce through the data, seeing not just numbers, but a life on the brink. Claire didn't speak. Not yet. Ramirez, oblivious to the silent presence that had just entered the room, suited up, his movements quick and decisive, preparing for what everyone knew was likely a one-way mission. Claire watched him from the back wall, arms folded, her posture still and silent, a statue of quiet contemplation. Then, with a sudden piercing shriek, The fuel line alarm sounded. A faulty valve. An unexpected mechanical failure. A cruel twist of fate that sealed the boy's doom. There was no time to fix it. No spare parts immediately available. No window of opportunity in the raging storm. They grounded the bird. The room went quiet again. The silence even heavier than before. Suffocating with despair. A child was dying. His last breaths a fading whisper in the icy wind. No one could fly. The desperate hope that had flickered moments before was now extinguished, leaving only the chilling grip of helplessness. Then, in that moment of utter desolation, Claire moved. No words, no grand speech, no dramatic declaration. She simply turned, her movements fluid and purposeful, and walked straight out of dispatch, headed down the hall to a locker no one had opened in years. It was a ghost of a locker, holding a ghost of a past, waiting for its moment to resurrect a legend. She spun the dial, the old mechanism, groaning in protest as she carefully aligned the numbers, a combination locked away in the recesses of her memory for decades. With a soft click, the heavy metal door swung open, revealing a sparse interior, a repository of a forgotten life. Inside, there was only one item, a helmet. It was matte black, scratched in countless places, its surface bearing the silent scars of past encounters, well worn yet still holding the formidable aura of its former purpose. She picked it up, her fingers, brushing away a fine layer of dust that had settled over the years, a testament to its long slumber. The name, etched inside the rim, was still perfectly legible. C. Dawson, a stark reminder of the warrior she once was, a ghost of her former glory. She walked into Hangar Bay 3 like it was any other shift, her steps measured and unhurried, as if this extraordinary moment were simply another day at the office. Except this time she wasn't holding a wrench. She was wearing flight boots, their worn leather a symbol of past journeys and future possibilities. The subtle shift in her attire, from the grease-stained overalls to the pilot's gear, was a silent, powerful declaration that echoed through the stunned hangar. Eloise was the first to truly see her, her jaw dropping in a mixture of disbelief and awe. "Claire," she stammered, her voice a hushed whisper. "What are you doing?" The question hung in the air, thick with unspoken implications. Claire looked at her, her gaze steady and unwavering, a silent answer in her eyes. "Prepping," she stated simply, her voice low but clear, carrying an undeniable authority. The only machine that can get through this storm. The sheer audacity of her statement, the quiet confidence in her voice, stunned everyone into silence. "But you're not cleared," Josh interjected, his voice laced with desperation, his mind struggling to reconcile the rules with the dire reality. Claire, already stepping onto the skid of the helicopter, her movements, fluid and decisive, flipped open a maintenance panel. "Cleared or not, someone's flying this bird," she retorted, her words cutting through the air like a knife, leaving no room for argument. Josh stepped forward, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and reluctant admiration. "You're serious?" he asked, the question barely a whisper. Claire glanced at him, a faint, almost imperceptible smile playing on her lips. "Do you know anyone else here who's landed in zero viz with no radar, one rotor, dying, and a heart monitor flatlining in the back seat?" Her words were a brutal, irrefutable challenge, a direct confrontation to their inexperience and their fear. Silence descended once more, heavy and absolute, as the truth of her unparalleled past hung in the air. Then Eloise did something no one expected. With a sudden burst of courage, she grabbed a headset and handed it to Claire. "Comms are yours," she declared, her voice firm, an unspoken vote of confidence in the face of impossible odds. Claire nodded once, a silent acknowledgement of their shared purpose. Eloise, her resolve solidified, followed her into the cockpit, ready to face the unknown. Josh, still grappling with the enormity of the situation, called out, a desperate plea hanging in the icy air. "You need help?" Claire paused, her hand hovering over the controls, a ghost of a challenge in her eyes. "Do you want to ride?" she asked, her voice calm, yet carrying an unspoken invitation to face the impossible. His eyebrows shot up, a flicker of his old bravado returning, ignited by the sheer audacity of her question. "I thought you'd never ask." he replied, a new respect dawning in his voice, his previous dismissal replaced by a grudging admiration. The chopper's massive blades, a symphony of latent power, slowly began to spin, cutting through the heavy, frigid air with a rhythmic whirring that sent shivers down the spine. One by one, the scattered crew members gathered, drawn by the irresistible pull of the unfolding drama. They watched, transfixed, some filming on their phones, others whispering in hushed tones, the air thick with a mixture of fear and morbid fascination. "She's really going," someone murmured, their voice barely audible above the rising roar of the rotors. "No one flies in this," another grimly predicted. "She's going to crash." Claire, oblivious to their doubt and dire predictions, adjusted the seat, its familiar contours molding to her body as if welcoming an old friend. Everything still fit, a perfect synergy between pilot and machine. She gripped the controls, her hands steady and strong like greeting a long-lost companion, the familiar weight of the stick a comforting presence in her palms. This wasn't just a flight, it was a reunion, a reawakening. "This is Hilo 3, Eloise announced into the radio, her voice trembling slightly with a mix of awe and trepidation, yet imbued with a newfound authority. "We are lifting off with Commander Claire Dawson at the stick." A crackled reply, laced with disbelief, came through the comms. "Repeat that," the voice demanded, clearly struggling to comprehend the audacious claim. Eloise, a triumphant smile blooming on her face, retorted, "You heard me." Claire looked once toward the vast, swirling expanse of the sky, her eyes holding a lifetime of unspoken stories. Then, with a smooth, almost effortless motion, she lifted off. The snow met her like a solid wall, an impenetrable white curtain that threatened to engulf them instantly. But she didn't flinch. Her hands remained steady, her resolve unwavering. Because flying wasn't just something she used to do. It was an intrinsic part of her being, an ingrained knowledge that she had never truly forgotten, merely stored away in the deepest recesses of her soul. The storm swallowed the helicopter whole, a hungry white beast consuming its prey. From the ground, the powerful machine vanished within seconds of takeoff, leaving no discernible shape. No shadow, just a fading pulse of sound that slowly diminished into the roaring blizzard. Inside the cockpit, surrounded by the cacophony of the storm, Claire kept her hands firm on the controls, an anchor in the swirling chaos. The instrument panel flickered erratically, struggling against the electromagnetic interference of the blizzard. Snow lashed against the windshield like relentless shards of glass, threatening to shatter their tenuous grip on reality. Josh sat beside her, silent for once, his usual swagger completely gone, replaced by a profound, chilling realization. Even he knew this wasn't a training flight. This was raw, unadulterated survival. Claire leaned forward, peering into the maelstrom. "No GPS," she stated calmly, her voice cutting through the noise. "We're flying by instinct." Josh glanced at her, a flicker of genuine fear in his eyes, starkly different from his earlier bravado. "You've done this before?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper, the question hanging in the air, heavy with unspoken awe. She didn't answer directly, didn't have to. The truth, raw and undeniable, hung in the frigid air between them. Yes, she'd done this in places far worse than this. She had navigated blinding sandstorms in the unforgiving desert, flown through the inky blackness of moonless nights, and braved relentless enemy fire, each experience etching deeper layers of resilience into her soul. But this was a different kind of war. This time the enemy was not a visible threat but an insidious force of forgetting who she was, what she had done, the incredible feats she was still capable of. It was a battle against the world's dismissive memory, a fight to reclaim her own narrative. She turned the helicopter slightly east, then banked low, a subtle, almost imperceptible maneuver guided by an inner compass that transcended instrumentation. "I'm following the river," she said, her voice calm and steady, a stark contrast to the swirling chaos outside. Frozen now, but it cuts clean through the ridge. Josh checked the map on his console, his brow furrowed in disbelief. "You can't see it," he stated, the obvious fact a challenge to her audacious claim. Claire gave a faint, knowing smile, a hint of the formidable pilot she truly was. Doesn't mean it's not there. They flew in silence, surrounded by an endless, featureless white, the world outside the cockpit a terrifying void. Then, a flash of memory, vivid and unsettling, pierced through. Claire's focus. Another flight years ago. Afghanistan, 2006. The rotor barely holding, groaning under impossible strain. A soldier in the back bleeding out, his life ebbing away with every passing second. The comms dead, their lifeline to the outside world severed. Claire, her voice remarkably calm amidst the roaring chaos, talking him through the pain. A silent promise of survival in the face of certain death. She landed that day without instruments, without support, her actions guided solely by instinct and an unwavering will to save lives. And every single soul on board was alive, a testament to her unparalleled skill and courage. Josh adjusted his mic, his voice hesitant, breaking the heavy silence. "You ever scared?" he asked, the question raw and vulnerable. Claire stared straight ahead, her gaze fixed on the endless white, her expression unreadable. "All the time," she replied, the simple honesty of her words cutting through the air. He nodded slowly, a silent acknowledgement of shared fear. "Same." She glanced over at him, a rare, genuine warmth in her eyes. "That's good. Means you still care what happens." They cleared the first ridge, a momentary break in the relentless white. Instantly, the wind sheared hard from the left, a brutal, unseen force. The chopper jolted violently, tilting dangerously, threatening to spiral out of control. Josh instinctively grabbed the panel, his knuckles white with fear, bracing for impact. Claire didn't. She shifted her weight, a subtle, almost imperceptible movement, adjusted the pitch with a touch as delicate as a surgeon's, and let the storm push her, cooperating with its raw power rather than fighting against it. "Ride the wind," she muttered, her voice a low, almost meditative hum. "Don't fight it." It was a lesson honed in countless battles, a philosophy learned from the very air itself. Josh stared at her, his face a mask of bewildered awe. "You flew in combat, didn't you?" he asked, the realization slowly dawning on him, connecting the dots of the whispered legends. Claire's eyes flicked down for a fraction of a second, a fleeting glimpse into the depths of her past. Then softly, her voice carrying the weight of untold stories, she confirmed, "Sangar Valley, 4 tours." His jaw dropped, the information hitting him with the force of a physical blow. "That's where my uncle served," he whispered, a tremor in his voice, the universe suddenly shrinking to a single, impossible connection. She nodded once, a simple confirmation that sent a chill down his spine. "I flew him out." Josh stared, his mind reeling. "No way." Claire didn't smile, didn't blink. Her gaze remained steady, unflinching, as she delivered the brutal, unvarnished truth. His leg was gone. A pause heavy with the weight of that sacrifice, then she added, her voice barely audible but firm with conviction, "But he lived." Josh whispered, the words barely escaping his lips. "He said the pilot was a ghost. No name. Just came out of the sky." He had heard the tales, the myths, but never believed them to be real. Claire looked ahead, her gaze piercing through the swirling whiteout, fixed on a destination only she could perceive. "I'm not a ghost," she stated, her voice resonating with a quiet power, challenging the spectral image he held. "I'm just a mechanic who never stopped listening to the wind." Just then, the scanner beeped, a sharp, insistent sound cutting through the roar of the storm, signaling their proximity to Larkage. The hospital's rooftop, their makeshift landing zone, was iced over, a treacherous sheet of glass, and the pad itself was slick and tilted, a perilous challenge even in ideal conditions. Claire circled once, then twice, her eyes scanning the impossible terrain, calculating every variable, every risk. Then, with a sudden, breathtaking maneuver that defied all conventional wisdom, she dropped altitude fast, too fast. Josh shouted, his voice laced with unadulterated terror. "We're too low." Claire ignored him, her focus absolute, her senses acutely tuned to the rhythm of the wind and the subtle shifts of the chopper. She angled hard, a daring reverse pitch that felt like a free fall, letting the machine glide, just like countless sand landings she had perfected in other, equally hostile environments. The skids hit. It was rough, jarring but clean. They didn't bounce, didn't slide, settling with an almost unnatural precision that defied the perilous conditions. Josh exhaled, a ragged gasp of air, as if he hadn't breathed in a minute, his body shaking with the aftershocks of the impossible descent. Claire, with the same calm efficiency, killed the engine. Eloise's voice crackled through the comms, a frantic mix of hope and desperation. "Tell me you made it." Josh, his voice thick with emotion, grabbed the mic, the words tumbling out in a rush of relief. "She made it. We're on the roof." A collective cheer erupted from the dispatch center, a wave of pure, unadulterated joy that cut through the lingering tension. "Copy that," Eloise replied, her voice cracking with the immense relief that washed over her, a testament to the harrowing moments they had just endured. "They're bringing the kid up now." Claire stepped out into the biting snow, the wind howling around her, a relentless, icy assault that tore at her hair and clothing. The cold bit into her exposed skin, raw and unforgiving, but she didn't flinch, didn't show a flicker of discomfort, because this, she knew, was what she was made for. Not medals, not the fleeting applause of adoring crowds, but moments like this, the raw, visceral reality of saving a life against impossible odds. A nurse, her face pale with exhaustion and concern, brought the boy in, wrapped tightly in blankets, his small body barely breathing, a fragile spark of life clinging desperately to existence. Claire, with practiced ease, immediately moved to assist. "Strap him in," she instructed, her voice calm and authoritative, her hands already checking his pulse, a rhythmic beat that, though weak, was still present. Then, without a moment's hesitation, she climbed back into the cockpit, ready for the perilous return journey. Josh stared at her, his eyes wide with a newfound awe, as if seeing her for the very first time, truly seeing beyond the grease-stained overalls and the quiet demeanor. The wrench lady he had so carelessly dismissed was now a legend in his eyes, a beacon of courage and skill. "You're not the wrench lady," he said quietly, the words a profound realization, a whispered apology for his past ignorance. Claire looked at him, a faint, knowing smile gracing her lips, acknowledging his transformation. "No," she replied, her voice soft but firm, carrying the weight of a lifetime of purpose. "I'm the one who gets them home." The return flight was even worse, if such a thing were possible. The storm had thickened, its fury intensified, transforming the air into a heavier, meaner adversary. A swirling maelstrom of snow and ice. Claire's hands stayed firm on the controls, an unyielding force against the brutal elements, her focus absolute. Josh, now a diligent co-pilot rather than a cocky novice, checked the boy's vitals every 60 seconds, his gaze fixed on the small, flickering numbers. The child's breathing was shallow, his skin pale, but he was alive. That was all that mattered, the sole objective that fueled their desperate fight against the storm. As they crossed the second ridge, the wind slammed into the tail rotor with violent force, a sudden, brutal impact that sent a tremor through the entire chopper. The machine lurched violently, pitching sideways, threatening to tumble out of the sky. Josh braced himself, his body tensing for the inevitable crash. Claire didn't panic. She leaned into the gust, a fluid, almost instinctive adjustment of the yaw, counteracting the sudden, violent force of the wind. "Come on, girl," she whispered, her voice a low murmur, a gentle coaxing to the struggling machine. Just a little more. It was a moment of profound intimacy between pilot and aircraft, a silent communication forged in the crucible of countless shared battles. Josh looked at her, a flicker of bewildered understanding in his eyes. "You talk to the chopper?" he asked, the question laced with a hint of awe. Claire nodded, a simple confirmation of a truth known to every truly great aviator. Every good pilot does. He tried to smile, but his lips faltered, the grim reality of their situation settling heavily upon him. They were losing daylight, the faint glow on the horizon fading rapidly, threatening to plunge them into complete darkness, making the already impossible landing even more treacherous. The approach to Mountain Crest, their home base, was notoriously tight, a perilous maneuver even in clear conditions. Now, an oppressive fog had settled over the base like a shroud, obscuring all visibility, transforming the familiar landscape into a featureless void. Eloise's voice, a lifeline through the crackling radio, cut through the noise. "We've cleared the pad. You're good to land," she announced, her voice tinged with hope. Claire replied softly, her voice calm and resolute. "Negative. Visibility is too low." She banked left, a decisive turn that defied Eloise's instructions. "There's a clearing behind the station. Gravel lot. Used to be a training field." Josh frowned, his mind scrambling to recall any such location on the current. "Base maps. That's not marked," he stated, a note of panic rising in his voice. Claire's grip tightened on the controls, her knuckles white, a silent testament to the immense concentration required. "It doesn't have to be," she retorted, her voice firm, unwavering. "I trained there." As they approached the unmarked clearing, lights flickered dimly through the thick mist, cutting through the oppressive gloom like desperate beacons. The ground crew, alerted by Eloise's frantic instructions, had intuitively lined up their trucks in a wide circle, their headlights blazing, creating a makeshift landing pad, a beacon of hope in the unforgiving storm. It was an improvised solution, a testament to their desperate ingenuity, and a reflection of the trust they had inexplicably placed in the ghost pilot. Claire lowered the skids slowly, her movements precise and deliberate, a master conductor bringing her symphony to a breathtaking crescendo. The skids touched down without a single bounce, a testament to her unparalleled skill, a soft, almost ethereal landing amidst the chaos. Silence descended, thick and absolute, followed by an explosion of sound, cheering, a loud, unfiltered roar of relief and triumph. The moment they stepped out of the chopper, cameras flashed, not from news crews but from the crew itself, the staff, the very people who had never looked at Claire twice. Now they couldn't look away, their faces etched with awe and admiration. Josh climbed down from the chopper, his arms cradling the small, vulnerable body of the boy, a precious cargo saved from the jaws of the blizzard. Claire followed, her old, matte black helmet clutched in her hand, its surface a testament to countless battles fought and won. Her boots crunched softly in the fresh snow, each step a quiet punctuation mark to the extraordinary moment. Commander Dalton, the base director, a man of rigid rules and unwavering protocol, rushed over, his face a mixture of relief and disbelief. He stopped, dead in his tracks, his eyes widening as he recognized the figure before him. "You flew that bird," he stated, his voice a strained whisper, the question barely escaping his lips, laced with an accusation he couldn't quite voice. Claire gave a single firm nod, her gaze unwavering, acknowledging the undeniable truth. Dalton looked around, his eyes searching for answers, a desperate attempt to find someone to blame. "Who cleared her?" he demanded, his voice rising, regaining its usual, authoritative tone. Eloise, with a newfound courage that seemed to blossom in the aftermath of their harrowing ordeal, stepped forward, her chin held high. "I did," she declared, her voice firm, accepting full responsibility for her audacious decision. Dalton's face turned a furious shade of red, his fury bubbling to the surface. "This is a violation," he sputtered, his bureaucratic mind struggling to grasp the heroic defiance that had just unfolded. Claire, with a quiet strength that silenced his tirade, cut him off. "You have a live patient inside that aircraft who wouldn't be breathing if I hadn't taken that risk," Claire stated, her voice low, calm, yet firm, imbued with an authority that dwarfed Dalton's rank. It was a statement of undeniable fact, a truth that resonated through the silent crowd. Dalton stammered, caught off guard by her unwavering resolve. "That's not the point," he began, attempting to reassert his authority, to bring the situation back to the comfortable confines of regulations. Claire took a step closer, her presence radiating a quiet power that seemed to push him back. "No," she interjected, her voice cutting through his protest. "The point is that child is alive and I'm not sorry." The crowd was silent, a collective gasp of awe and admiration rippling through them. Then from behind a voice spoke, deep, firm, and undeniably military, carrying the weight of decades of command. "I know that tone." They turned, their eyes drawn to a tall man in a heavy coat, silver stars gleaming on his shoulders reflecting the dim light. It was General Markson, retired Air Rescue Command, a living legend in his own right. He looked at Claire, his gaze piercing, a flicker of recognition in his eyes. "You're Dawson, aren't you?" he asked, his voice a rumble of certainty. She nodded once, a silent confirmation. "You flew my nephew out of Basra." Claire's eyes, usually so impassive, softened with a distant memory. "Town, I remember," she said, her voice barely audible. "He had a shrapnel wound." Markson smiled, a genuine warmth spreading across his face. "I sent a thank you letter. I sent 10. You never answered." Claire shrugged, a characteristic gesture of indifference to accolades. "I didn't fly for thank yous." Markson turned to Dalton, his voice deepening, gaining a commanding edge that left no room for argument. "This woman is a legend, and you grounded her," he stated, his words a scathing indictment of the director's short-sightedness and ignorance. Dalton froze, his face paling, realizing the full weight of the general's condemnation. Markson raised his voice just enough to be heard clearly throughout the still reverberating hangar, a thunderous declaration that demanded immediate compliance. "Get her flight credentials reinstated immediately," Dalton sputtered, his composure completely shattered. "She's not on staff," he protested weakly, clinging to the last vestiges of bureaucratic protocol. Markson's gaze hardened, his voice cutting like steel. "She is now." A beat of profound silence stretched, thick with anticipation. Then a burst of spontaneous applause erupted, a powerful wave of appreciation that swept through the gathered crowd. Josh stepped closer to Claire, his voice quiet, filled with a newfound respect. "You okay?" he asked, his genuine concern evident. Claire exhaled slowly, a long-held breath finally released. "Feels strange," she admitted, a hint of vulnerability in her voice. Josh smiled, a true, unburdened smile. "Feels earned." As the crew gathered around, their faces reflecting a mixture of awe and admiration, someone whispered, "She's not just the wrench lady anymore." The old nickname, once a symbol of dismissiveness, was now a relic of the past, replaced by a new, more profound understanding. And for the first time in 22 years, a genuine, unburdened smile bloomed on Claire's face, a radiant expression that transformed her features and lit up the snow-covered tarmac. They didn't call her wrench lady after that. They called her commander. The story spread like wildfire, its details embellished and amplified with each retelling. By morning, her impossible flight had made local news, a sensational headline that captivated the region. By afternoon, it had gone national. A 64-year-old mechanic, plucked from obscurity and retirement, flying blind through a raging blizzard to save a dying child. They called it bravery. They called it impossible. But Claire, with her characteristic humility, simply called it her job. Still, the buzz didn't stop. Reporters, hungry for a heartwarming human interest story, showed up at the base gates, eager for an interview, a quote, anything to capture the essence of the legend. Veterans, recognizing a kindred spirit, started sending letters, heartfelt messages of gratitude and admiration from across the country. Pilots, seasoned aviators who truly understood the gravity of her feat, wrote in, asking for the honor of meeting her, to shake the hand of a living legend. One even confessed, "I trained because of a story I once heard about you. I didn't know it was real." At first, Claire, true to her nature, ignored it all. She retreated to the familiar comfort of the hangar, checking oil levels, replacing hydraulic lines, immersing herself in the quiet, methodical work she knew so well. But the world kept knocking, persistently demanding her attention, refusing to let her fade back into the shadows. Finally, recognizing the undeniable public interest and the profound impact of her actions, Mountain Crest reluctantly scheduled a formal recognition. It wasn't anything grand. No extravagant ceremony or lavish display of pomp and circumstance, just a quiet, unassuming gathering on the landing pad, the very ground she had so miraculously touched down upon. Yet the entire base showed up, a silent testament to the shift in their perceptions, their previous indifference replaced by a profound respect. Claire, true to her understated nature, wore her old flight jacket, its worn fabric a second skin, a tangible link to her storied past. The patch from Sangar Valley, a faded emblem of countless missions, was still stitched proudly on its sleeve, a silent declaration of the battles she had fought and the lives she had saved. General Markson, the man who had recognized her legend, took the mic, his voice resonating with authority and genuine admiration. He told stories no one had ever heard, tales of classified missions, of lives snatched from the jaws of death, of a pilot who never sought the spotlight but kept others alive in the darkest, most desperate hours. His words painted a vivid picture of the silent hero Claire had always been, a beacon of hope in the chaos of war zones. Then, his gaze softening, he turned directly to Claire, his voice carrying the weight of profound gratitude. "You were never forgotten by those who mattered," he stated, his words a powerful validation that echoed through the hushed crowd, finally laying to rest the specter of her hidden past. Claire didn't reply. She didn't need to. Her quiet presence, her unwavering gaze, spoke volumes more than any words could. Later, inside the sterile confines of the command tent, the base director, still reeling from the events and the general's unexpected intervention, asked her a simple question, his voice hesitant, almost deferential. "What do you want, Claire? A title? A medal? We'll give you anything." He was offering her the very accolades she had once so resolutely refused, a second chance at the glory she had always shunned. She thought for a long, silent moment, her gaze distant, as if consulting with an inner compass. Then she answered softly, her voice carrying a profound conviction that surprised them all. "Let me teach." He blinked, taken aback by her unexpected request. "Teach?" he stammered, unsure he had heard correctly. She nodded, her eyes shining with a new purpose. "Not everyone gets a second chance to fly," she explained, her voice gaining strength. "But they all deserve to know how." And so, a new program, born from the crucible of crisis and the unwavering spirit of a living legend, was born. It was named the Dawson Flight Initiative, a mentorship track designed not for glory or accolades, but for empowering those often overlooked: veteran women, retired medics, and underserved youth. This groundbreaking program would meticulously train them in rotorcraft safety, imparting the crucial knowledge of emergency piloting and refining their skills in aerial rescue. Claire didn't ask for a salary, didn't demand control over the program's intricate structure, or seek any personal gain whatsoever. She simply showed up every morning at 5:15, same as always, her internal clock as precise as ever, embodying her familiar mantra: talk, inspect, adjust, teach. It was a profound evolution of her daily rhythm, a seamless transition from maintaining machines to nurturing human potential. Josh, the cocky young pilot whose life she had indirectly saved and whose respect she had undeniably earned, became her very first trainee, his eagerness a stark contrast to his earlier dismissiveness. Eloise, the observant trainee who had unearthed Claire's hidden past, became her second, her unwavering belief in Claire now a powerful force for change. Each session began the same way, a ritualistic opening that underscored the program's core philosophy. Claire would hold her old matte black helmet, its scratches and worn surface a silent testament to countless battles. "This doesn't make you brave," she would say, her voice calm and steady, imparting a wisdom far beyond technical instruction. "Knowing when to lift off and when not to, that's what keeps people alive." The crew listened, their faces rapt with attention, their pens scratching diligently across their notebooks, absorbing every word, every subtle nuance of her profound teachings. And slowly, imperceptibly at first, Claire Dawson began to transform. She became more than just a hero, more than a legend of the past. She became a guide, a mentor, a living embodiment of the spirit of flight and the unwavering commitment to saving lives. One evening, as the sun dipped below the distant ridge, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, a young cadet, full of youthful curiosity, posed a question that had lingered in many minds. "Why didn't you fight harder to stay in the air all those years ago?" he asked, his voice echoing the unspoken wonder of so many who had heard her story. Claire looked at the horizon, her gaze distant, filled with the weight of decades. "I thought my time was over," she replied, a faint hint of melancholy in her voice, acknowledging the perceived end of an era. "Was it?" the cadet pressed, seeking a deeper truth. She smiled, a profound, knowing smile that illuminated her face. Turns out legends don't retire. They just wait. Claire never asked for applause, never sought the front of the room, never craved the spotlight that now rightfully shone upon her. Yet somehow, by simply showing up each day, by consistently embodying her quiet courage and unparalleled wisdom, she became the undisputed center of it all. Her students, inspired by her unique teaching style and profound insights, started affectionately calling her Coach C. Some of the older techs, those who had witnessed her transformation from wrench lady to living legend, still respectfully called her Commander, a title now imbued with newfound reverence. But Claire, she just smiled, her eyes reflecting the quiet pride of a purpose fulfilled, and kept teaching. She shared things that weren't found in any manual: how to listen to the wind through your fingertips, how to feel an engine's heartbeat through the floor panel, how to breathe steady when everything around you is chaos. She told them, pilots don't control the sky, they cooperate with it. That was her way, her profound philosophy of life and flight. Every now and then, a visitor would stop by, someone who had heard her extraordinary story. They'd shake her hand, ask for a photo, tell her she was an inspiration. She always said the same thing, her humility unwavering. I didn't do anything special, I just didn't let the fear stop me. Then she'd hand them a wrench. Now go fix something. One chilly afternoon, Claire stood near the training chopper, watching her newest student, a nervous teenager. Girl, prepare for her first lift. The girl fumbled her checklist, her hands shaking with trepidation. Claire walked over, kneeling to her level, her presence a calming anchor. She gently handed her the helmet. Breathe. Feel your feet. The sky is not your enemy. It's just waiting on you. The girl nodded, a flicker of resolve in her eyes. Claire stepped back. The rotors spun, a rising crescendo of power. The chopper lifted, slow and shaky, but steady. Claire's face lit with quiet pride. Behind her, Josh and Eloise stood watching, a silent testament to her enduring legacy. She reminds me of you, Eloise whispered. Claire tilted her head, a soft smile gracing her lips. She's better. They laughed, a shared moment of profound understanding. Just then, a little girl, perhaps 9, ran across the field toward Claire, her oversized boots crunching in the snow. She held a toy helicopter in her arms, her eyes wide with dreams. Miss Claire, she said breathlessly, do you think I could fly one day? Claire knelt to her level, gently touching her shoulder, her gaze filled with warmth and conviction. Sweetheart, she said, you already are. And as they stood there, watching the sky open wide above them, it was clear to anyone looking, legends don't retire. They rise again and again.